Who are you? Where do you work and what do you do? Lacey, you get to start.
My name is Lacey. I work at We Can Code It, which is a software development boot camp here in Columbus. I am the student success coach, so I lovingly like to say that is career coaching and therapy all in one.
My name is Jessica. I work here at ScriptDrop. I am a junior software developer, and I work mostly on our internal dashboard.
For the record, AWH is hiring a junior developer right now. Talk to Kiara. Talk to Kiara. Okay, so I'm Robin, and I work at AWH, and I am not a recruiter. Yeah, I probably am, but they call us career developers. AWH, a software engineering firm in Dublin, been around 24 years. It used to stand for Allen Williams Hughes, which were the three names of the partners, right? And they're all still kind of involved. So, but now we're cooler. We're cooler, and now we're just AWH. Okay.
I am Gayle, and I work for JP Morgan Chase, and I am a Ruby on Rails developer there. I guess that's it.
All right. So we hear the phrase culture fit thrown around a lot, in particular during the recruiting and hiring process. What does that phrase mean to you, Gayle?
Well, I think that when I think of it, I first think of what it doesn't mean. And I think it doesn't mean I'm going to get along with everybody. Because I think it's easy to think a fit means you get along with everybody. And then you get into things like, oh, well, we all want to think alike and, one of us. And yet we talk so much about diversity and diversity in the workplace, just having people coming from different backgrounds and thinking differently and bringing more ideas to the table. You're going to have better things. So I think sometimes I've seen the conversation get into talking about the opposite of diversity. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's more finding a place that you can grow and not be stifled, and vice versa. I think a culture fit for the company is important, to hire people that are also, you are able to help them grow and mature and, align your goals and be mutually beneficial.
Robin, what do you think?
So I think, so to me, culture and culture fit, culture is the intangible, right? And I have notes, right? Because I'm old and I forget things. But culture is the intangible vibe of an organization, right? So I was thinking about it this afternoon. So what exactly does that mean? And I thought of three things. To me, culture is how a group of people or how an organization normalizes communication, right? How we communicate with each other internally. Here at ScriptDrop or at AWH, right? It's a little different for every organization, I think, right? And I also think culture means what is important to the organization and to the people that work there. And is it all about the product, right? Or the profit, or is it about the people doing the work, right? I mean, it's very different. And then I also think culture is the third thing, what we get rewarded for. That's a really bad sentence, isn't it? Let me rephrase that. Well, no, what we're rewarded for, right, in the job? Like, do we get kudos and support because we're learning new things all the time, right? I mean, is that it? Or is it you're in sales and you hit the numbers, and so, okay, we have this sales culture, right? So, yeah. So, but overall, culture is the people, right? And it's that intangible vibe. But those are the three things that I could think of that really sort of embody it for me.
Awesome.
Right?
Thank you, Robin. Jessica, what are your thoughts?
That was so thorough. So when I think of culture fit as an employee, I have a definition, and I think that definition is different from an employer's idea of culture fit. unfortunately, and maybe this isn't always true, and maybe this is a lie that employees kind of feel or have been told or have experienced historically, but culture fit from an employer's point of view for me is the understanding that you will fit yourself into normalized roles that have already existed at the company. Can you fit into this box comfortably, and are we going to be comfortable with you? For me, my definition of culture fit is just authenticity. Can you go to work being 100% yourself, the dirty, gross, sometimes wrong person, and still be accepted and valued, and still be valued for your output and how well you work. So those are my definitions.
Lacey, what are your thoughts?
So I 100% agree with being your authentic self in the workplace, but I also think that there's a piece about values. So every company has values, and do you agree with those values? Then it may not be a culture fit for you. So I know that when we are hiring with We Can Code It internally, we look at not, is everybody going to get along with this person, or do I think that I'm going to have a great conversation with them, but do they align with the values that we have set? Like, at the end of the day, do you have the same thought as to what the end goal is? Not necessarily the approach of how to get to that end goal, but do you understand what the end goal is, and is that something that you're willing to work for? So, I mean, obviously, I believe in diversity and inclusion, heavily in inclusion, and that means that, you're taking everybody's thoughts into consideration. So culture fit to me is more about the value system of the company and being able to align within that.
Wonderful. So startup culture and enterprise culture, they're often discussed as being on polar opposite ends of a spectrum. Why do you think that is, and what makes them so different?
That's a funny question because I've talked about it with my students. I think that there's the thought that startup culture means everything is new, nothing is organized. There's this fear of, within the startup culture that it's not stable. Enterprise to a lot of people means stable. It means that I'm going to have a job at the end of the day. But then it also, on the flip side, means that I have to wear a button down and a tie every day, or heels, or whatever it may be. And startup is t-shirt and jeans. I think that it comes from this whole thought about the Silicon Valley and how you picture, a Google or Facebook started, and those companies that are super techy, super startup, the ones that you see on TV, not necessarily the real life. And it's funny because I always tell people they're like, oh, I don't want to go to a startup. Why? Well, because it's not stable. Well, some of these companies are more stable than this team at this corporate company that is going to lay off a bunch of people in a year. So I think it's a lot of visual things. I think it's news, it's TV, it's the internet, it's everything that we see that we interpret as being startup or enterprise.
Jessica, what do you think?
I agree with all of that. Very thorough. Again. I agree that it's a misunderstanding based on perception, media, that startup cultures, and I'm going to kick myself for saying this, have kegs, but we actually have a keg. Oh, man. I'm proving my own point here. But that's not to say that your experience as an employee wouldn't be the same at either a startup or an enterprise, right? It would depend on, again, culture. It would depend on the team. I think it's a lot of just perception. That one is younger, hipper, faster, less stable, and none of those things are necessarily true at every startup, and the opposite is not true at every enterprise.
So I have notes. This is what happens when I work from home. This happens. So so I do, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning. So I'm also a freelance writer, right? And so I just recently wrote something on startup versus enterprise and which is a cooler culture to work for, right? So, and you can read that, by the way, if you go to artisantalent.com. Anyway, whatever. So so the dilemma is when you think of an enterprise organization, you think, you know, well established, been around a long time, probably stodgy, probably have to wear a tie, right, or whatever, a dress or something. I don't know. And I would wear the tie actually. I like ties. And but so okay. And startups are the disruptors, right? Startups are, so I'm thinking nationwide insurance, right? And then the internets, right? It comes along and suddenly there's root insurance. And it's breaking the established paradigm of, you know, it's a big insurance pool and I have to pay for bad drivers because we're all in the same pool, right? And then root comes in and they go, no, you're a good driver, Robin. We're going to cut your rates by $3 billion, right? So the startup to me is the disruptor, right? The enterprise organization, it's not by size because you've got Google, right? I mean, they've been around a while now and they're still generally pretty cool. I mean, they have a slide in their, you know, front lobby that doesn't matter, right? Amazon, right? I mean, they rule the planet. God, I love them. Okay, not. I don't love them. Cherry used to work for them. Yeah, and Apple, right? I mean, my God, Apple's been around forever. Pretty innovative. I like my Mac a lot, right? So it's not. So there also can be established companies that somehow keep that innovative spark. And how do they do that? I figured it out. Okay, maybe. I have three things because I like threes, okay? The startup vibe asks why. And sometimes that's where enterprise organizations fall down. They forget to say, why the hell am I doing it this way? This doesn't make sense anymore. We've got this new product and look, you could do it a lot faster. And look at how these three departments are doing the same thing. People don't say that in enterprise organizations a lot because there's stability and security, and I'm going to retire there, not, right? So they ask why. They take risks, right? That's big in startups, right? In part because they don't know what they're doing. But let's face it, if you've worked in an enterprise organization, how many have worked in an enterprise organization that doesn't know what they're doing? Okay, right? Okay, so there has to be an element of risk there. How have enterprise organizations have responded? Tell me when to shut up.
Keep going.
Have responded by forming these innovation centers, right? So Cardinal Fuse, right? And so they have these innovation centers, and the idea is that we're just going to make this really cool building, and it's going to have a slide in the front lobby, and the developers get to do whatever the hell they want. We're going to cater their meals, and then so many times that innovation never translates to the enterprise because it gets stuck in the enterprise bureaucracy because you've got all these nerdy people around the outer fringes, including C-suite executives that are like, I'm scared. I've got stockholders. They're going to not want us to make this big change. So innovation centers that have failed, Wendy's, right up in Dublin, just closed theirs down. New York Times, Disney, Facebook, Nordstrom, Coca-Cola. Yeah, they all shut down their internet. Now, I don't know. I just don't think they're innovative at all, right? I don't know what they're doing. So they ask why, startup culture. They take risks. And the other thing is they continuously improve. And that's a huge difference. AWH has, I mean, we've been around for 24 years, but we have a startup culture. It drives me crazy sometimes, right? Because I'm like, why don't we know who we're going to be when we grow up? What is going on here? I'm 54. Why can't I have a company that has its act together? Because we're a startup. Because we're continually asking why and taking risks and continuously improving. And that's the third one, Izzy, right? the startup culture has this big, hairy, audacious goal, right? So sometimes I think enterprise organizations lose that spirit of continually reaching toward whatever that goal is, that BHAG, right? And so, but you can still have that startup culture within an enterprise organization if you remember how to ask why and how to do all those things, right? Does that make sense?
That totally makes
Am I
sense.
making sense? I'm on cold medicine. You have no idea. All right.
So Gayle, I know you work at Chase, which is
Yeah.
considered enterprise.
I work at Chase.
What are your thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, where do I start? Well, I've worked for startups. I've worked for enterprise companies more than once. There are pros and cons of both, for sure. The idea of stability versus instability. There's ways that is true, but not in the ways that people think. That's the thing. I like to say, an enterprise company, if you're going to make big change, it's like moving a barge. And if you're at a startup, it's like moving a speedboat. And okay, the barge is maybe less likely to tip over completely. Maybe this team falls off board, and then maybe, it's not stable. You can still get it hurt. You can still be in danger. But being able to change that fast isn't always good either. I've worked for a startup company where they're like, oh, we're gonna rewrite everything using Ruby on Rails, and we're gonna do all this stuff, and at some point they just boom switched gears and we're doing Java, we're doing this, we're offshoring, we're outsourcing, and I found myself being a QA tester. And I'm like, well, this isn't the direction I wanted to go. So, all right, now I just have to jump off board, and I can do that. That's fine. So there's pros and cons, and it's not like priorities don't shift on the barge too. Like, hey, we're going over here now, whatever. But I think with a big company in particular, it's your team that matters. I've found that what motivates me is not necessarily what the company does. And that motivates some people. Sometimes that's a culture fit. I want to be in healthcare. I'm making a difference. Blah blah blah. My motivation is bettering myself as a developer. So I want a good team that's going to challenge me, that I can help lead them. And I was at a big company years ago, 2 different times as a consultant I was there. The very first time I was there, I hated every minute of it. They barely gave us anything to do. Everything I tried to do got kind of lost in, it's like, oh, we're trying to do this. And then it just got lost in the bureaucracy. And I don't know that anything I did ever made it to production. And then I was on a team later that I absolutely loved. Our team lead was great. Our tech lead, our architect. They're like, no, we are doing test-driven develop. We are doing this. We are doing the right thing, whether you like it or not. And I'm like, cool. I've never actually been on a team where I've been forced to do this. And I agreed with it, but management's like, no, we don't have time for that. And they're like, nope, we're doing this. We're doing this. And that it was at that big company that I learned TDD. You would think, oh, you're not going to learn anything new that you can. But it just depends completely on your team. In different times of your life, I think a startup or an enterprise can be a good fit for you. I was at a time in my life, I was able to work for a startup. I felt like for me, startup culture and a startup are different because you do take risks in a startup. It might not work out. I have a mortgage to pay on my own. Well, that's scary. And maybe I don't have whatever cushion I have, whatever. There's so many factors in that. I got married, had another income in the household. Now I have the freedom to try some new things and do a startup, and I've got some security there with me. And 2 or 3 of those didn't work out, and I'm like, I'm done with this, and I went to Chase because it takes a lot to lay anybody off there, from what I understand. And even stability. If they were to reorg our team or let me go, I can go somewhere else in Chase if I want to. I still have that. I'm paying my rent on my own again. So this is a good fit for me right now. I'm like, too much change. I'm doing this. So I think the time in your life can make a difference in your culture fit, is my point there.
All right. So what culture would you say that you work in?
Enterprise, for
Yeah.
sure.
No
Obviously,
way.
right? Is this the question?
Yeah, that's the question. That's it.
So startup. So startup.
Startup.
Very much a startup.
What's the best thing about the type of culture you work in?
Being heard and being able to make change. My first week at We Can Code It, I started on a Monday, and by Monday afternoon, I was already having one-on-ones with students on my own. I created a lesson plan within that first week, and my voice was heard. I came in, I sat and watched and listened to, they had done mock interviews, and I listened to the feedback from the mock interviews, and I'm like, hey, maybe we should add this as content, as a lesson. This should be something that we should be teaching because it's not something that's commonplace. And they were like, okay, cool, run with it. And so honestly, ever since then, I work in a place of asking for forgiveness instead of asking for permission, which is fun. It's pain sometimes, but it's fun because I have the opportunity to say and look at what's happening with our students, with our campus, with the employers that we work with, and saying, hey, you know what, this isn't working. Let's try changing it this time, and then see what happens, and then say, all right, Cleveland, take it, because we have 2 campuses. And that is probably the biggest piece that I love. And it's also fun. I have a CEO who has what we lovingly call developer brain, which means that she's like, this is an awesome idea. Let's do it. And the large majority of us besides the ed team are like, no. But she also, even though she's like developer brain and like, let's do it, she also hears us when we're like, no, that's probably not a good idea. So just the idea that, you know, in our company, everyone is heard. You can make changes if you want to.
Can you repeat the question?
What is the best thing about the type of culture you work in?
So I would say 2 things, possibly 3. The first is I am a huge proponent of self-care and work-life balance. And so working at a startup culture feels very flexible in terms of when and where I work that suits me best. So I love that. The second thing is also being of value very quickly. So I am a graduate of a boot camp, We Can Code It. And I've only been here at ScriptDrop for about 3 months. Is that right? 3 months. And I was very nervous coming into my first dev job for many reasons, but also because I wanted to be of value. I have a previous career, a very successful career in nonprofit world, and I was of value for a very long time. And changing careers, I was very nervous that it was going to be weeks and months before I could produce anything, you know, of value. And that wasn't true here. I think I pushed code my first week. So those 2 things.
Okay, so the question was what I like about AWH culture,
Yes.
right? It's us, right? It's the people. Everybody say hi to Kiara right there in the
Hi,
middle.
Kira.
She's awesome, right? When I came on board, we didn't have a recruiter. Like there were just devs sitting quietly with headphones on. There were 10 of them. And that was 3 years ago. Today is my 3-year anniversary. I know you should applaud because that's like amazing, man. I'm like, wow, I can't believe it. Wow. So I've had the opportunity to see the firm grow from, 10 nerds sitting with headphones on that wouldn't talk to me, and then we hired a bunch more, so that we're up to 45, maybe 50 people now. And we are awesome. Like, I can't believe 3 years later that everybody still likes each other. Like, we all like each other, like in a big company, like there are these little pods of people that don't talk to each other and don't play well. We don't have any of that stuff. Like, how did we do that? I'm not exactly sure, right? Except I've been the only recruiter. And so there's been a consistency in the kind of people that we hire. They're kind of like me, like total nerds, right? And like, and everybody's really engaged because every software project is different, right? I mean, the way we work is the clients come to us and say, I've got this business problem. Could you build me an IoT device or VR or blockchain or something, a web portal, whatever. And so part of our culture that I love is that we don't have an engagement problem. We all like each other. And you do you read the articles that like Pew, the big polling organization, every year they come out and they go, 70% of American workers are disengaged in their work. We don't have that, you guys. Like everybody's all in. Like everybody is all in and everybody likes each other. And so it is the people on the ground doing the work every day that is definitely the best part of us.
Okay, what do I like about enterprise culture? I would say every time that I've had a good experience at a big company, it's been the team, 100%. People supporting each other. You're not going to get 100% of the people on the team. I don't know. There's always one. I hate to say it, but there's always at least one. But just having that camaraderie. I don't go to lunch with my team very often right now. I don't know why. I probably should, but I felt like that makes a big difference in a team too. Kind of just getting a chance to talk away from the office. You kind of forge different relationships. You can do that in an enterprise company or a small company. I guess another thing about a big company is a lot of times they have cafeterias and good cafeterias, and that's actually kind of nice too. That is a perk. Where I'm at, there's a little health center down there. It's like, hey, this is cool. So there's perks like that, and pros and cons.
Are you ready for the cons?
Oh.
What's
Try
the
not to
worst
talk too
thing
long.
about the culture that you're in?
It's the biggest con, I think, with a big company is that my priorities come down from way above me, and sometimes I like that, to be honest. Sometimes I don't want to think. I just want to do my job and do it well. And like I said, one of my focuses is becoming a better developer, and my process and guiding other people to become better developers and have better process. And so, okay, tell me what to do and I'll do it because I'm going to find ways to do it better, no matter what it is. So for me, that's fine. But sometimes, you can feel maybe disengaged is a word. I don't get to choose the direction we're going, really. And sometimes it flips, and I'm like, really? Again? Okay. So that's probably one of the biggest negatives.
So what can I say in the con section so that I still have a job for 4 years? Okay, I'm thinking this through. So being honest, the con at AWH is we haven't figured out who we want to be when we grow up, and I mentioned that before. And for someone like me who's a totally anal, right? That drives me nuts. It's what you're talking about. Like, hey, Robin, find us a Ruby developer right now. And then next week it's like, wait, no, we don't need that. We really don't. Oh, seriously? Right? Power Builder. Power Builder was my hell 2 weeks ago. I found one and they didn't want him. They didn't want him. So some of this is not necessarily our fault. Some of it is the cyclic nature of selling, right? I mean, so that's part of it. I blame sales. Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, for me, the con is I wish we knew who we wanted to be when we grow up. That would make my job easier.
I have to be politically cool too because I'm here at work.
No pressure, Jess.
I suppose the con is really also a pro in some ways. This is good, right? Thank you. Yes. The con is that. Okay. So the con is, as a startup, you have to grasp every opportunity that comes across your path to keep growing as a startup. And that means a new client comes to your door and says, we want this thing that A, you've never thought of, B, you have no idea how to implement, and C, they want it in 2 weeks. And then D, you say yes because you're growing and you need their business. So the amount of the workload can be really heavy because you're grasping those opportunities and those chances. It can, right? Absolutely can, and you hope that it's like short stints, right? And you make adjustments in your life for that period of time, and hopefully it doesn't last too long.
So we're a really small startup. So one of the biggest cons is that we're really small. Therefore, there aren't a lot of people to do the lots of work that we have to do. So we get stretched thin a lot. So I think everyone that I work with loves what we do, but then all of us kind of reach a point where we're all like, all right, you know what, I'm burnt out. I need to take a couple of days off because otherwise I'm going to take your head off and you don't deserve that. And then the other piece, and it kind of ties into that, is we can be reactive, which we end up in situations sometimes and I think it's something that startup culture can find, because you don't know what's coming. You don't know what to expect. So then something happens and then you have to react instead of being prepared and being proactive and knowing how to handle those situations as they come, instead of you getting the situation and now you're like, well, shit, I don't know what to do from here. And so those will probably be the biggest cons.
Also, my paper's the right way around.
None of my team is here, so I can say what I want. Yeah. No.
The question was, do we have volunteers?
I wish. We do. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. That we definitely do. Kiera has done an incredible talk for us.
Do you want to share that tidbit out loud about having people come in and give talks?
Yes. If you would like to ever come in and talk to our students at We Can Code It, please feel free. I will share my LinkedIn information because my cards are in the car, and you can come in whenever you'd like. Our students are in class Monday through Friday, 9:30 to 3:30, and then every other Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 5.
Good job.
Thank you. It is intense.
What advice would you give to someone who might not have real world experience when it comes to determining the right culture for them?
So this is fun. The first lesson that every student that we have goes through is something that we call opportunity characteristics inventory. And it is a chart that basically says, what do you want out of a company or a job? Is this why is this what you want? And then is it negotiable or not? And it really makes you think about, if I have to do this job and I have to go 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, what do I really want to get out of it? Is it growth? Is it promotion opportunities? Is it flexibility? And so it makes the students think okay, if I had a job coming out of here and I'm going to be at this job and I'm going to be happy, what does it take? And also, is it negotiable? And my example is always, I've worked at companies that were larger. So when I looked at this, reflecting on for myself, I wanted to be in a company, and I wish I would have known this in college. If somebody put this chart in front of me in college, I would have loved it. I want to be at a company where I know everybody's name, and I know that even if we don't necessarily get along, I can have a conversation with pretty much everybody on my team. And, the one that, and that was non-negotiable. The one that was negotiable was I get to bring my dog to work, which is pretty great. But it forces students to think, and I think it's funny because most do it and they're we're grown, okay, fine, cool. But then when they get to the end and I've had students get to a point where they had 2 offers on the table, and one of them was like the shiny new toy, like I'm going to make this great salary and all of these other things. And then they had this other one that checked every box of the opportunity characteristics inventory, right? It checked every box. She had flexibility. She was able to bring her kids into work when school was out. I mean, she loved every bit of it. And I always force them, like, if you have options, or if you're ever on the fence, look at this look at this chart. Look at it, and does it check the boxes? If it doesn't, then it's a shiny new toy and it's time to move on. She took the one that she was able to bring her kids to work. It wasn't the highest salary, and then she ended up getting a promotion 6 months in. So.
Let's see. So besides values, which I was going to touch on, but I think you thoroughly covered that.
Sorry.
Thank you. I don't know. I would argue that no one lacks real world experience, and that doesn't have to be on the job. When I was a student and I was looking for my first development job, I went to every meetup in this city for 3 months straight, religiously. I ate pizza 4 nights a week. I think I gained 10 pounds. No, probably did. And that is real world experience. So the first time you meet someone at a company that you are considering, you will get a vibe. If they're happy there, if they are not. Do you jive with this person? Do you not? What is their experience? Right. So that is your experience if you don't have job history really to help guide you. That's my advice.
Yeah, wow, that's good. Okay, I can't top that one. So I don't have a list for this one. So everything they said, yes. But I would add this. I think I think culture. This whole emphasis on culture is really kind of a relatively new thing for us, right? Because back when, I mean, I've been in the workforce for 30 years, you guys. I mean, I've been working since I was pretty much 14. And yeah, no, I'm 54. So for like longer than 30 years. And thank you. And so I want to give you some perspective for a second. In my day, when I was starting out, I just needed a job, man. I got to pay the rent, right? And when I got out of college, I'm like, man, I took the first job that pretty much offered, and it was a pretty good one, actually. And so I would say to someone just starting out, first of all, you are super lucky in the current historically low unemployment situation that we're in now, that you even have options to think about culture, because that's almost like a classist thing, like, boy, dang, we are lucky to have our options, right? That you can actually pick and choose and go, okay, yeah, well, this culture is probably going to be better. So let's acknowledge that for a second. Like, there's a lot of us out there that take the first job that we get because it pays the rent or the mortgage or whatever, has health benefits. So there's that. So beyond that, I totally agree that you have to trust your gut. And if you're, let's make the assumption that it's a young person, right? Going out, starting their career path. The statistics show us now that the days of staying in a job, right? That as long as, man, it doesn't exist anymore. So number one, trust your gut. If you want to go online and fill out a really cool form, I think that's a good exercise to do for sure. The other thing is, if you're considering a company and you're really worried about culture, try pinging people on LinkedIn, and like you can find them and reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed that you work at Script Drop, right? And I'm considering coming there, and would you be willing to share off the record a phone call with me and just kind of let me know off the record, is this a good place? Right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. And I've done that before, and people are really cool about it. So all those things, I guess. And the other thing is, you're probably only going to stay in this job a couple of years, so don't stress too much, right? So that's everything.
That's funny. I was just talking about that with some coworkers yesterday, maybe. My dad was at the same company for 30 years or whatever before he retired. Nobody does that anymore. But that's good and bad. I think it's good, really. For me, I started out my career working for a consulting firm. And there's different types of consulting firms. I didn't have to travel all over the country. They were just in Columbus. And I thought that was a great way to start out my career because I got to spend time at different companies, seeing what different cultures are before I even thought of culture as a thing. I got to meet a lot of people in Columbus. I got to see a lot of ways different companies work and what they do. And that was really helpful to me. I probably spent the first 10 years of my career doing consulting. And then I decided I wanted to be at a company longer, and I got out of consulting, but I went to startups, and those didn't work out 3 times in a row. So I'm like, what am I really doing here? But that's fine. That's fine. It worked out every time. As a result, definitely getting to know a lot of people in the community is important. And that kind of goes to what you're saying about going to user groups, meeting people. You can get a vibe of what their company is like. And going to conferences like Stir Trek and Columbus Code Camp and whatever, Code Mesh even. You meet so many people that I feel so fortunate in my career now that if the last few jobs I've had, I haven't really had to interview there other than formally because I know people that work there. And I want to go there because I know that they work there and because I know that they like it. So I already know it's a culture fit for me because I know people that work there. But that doesn't happen overnight. That happens from coming to stuff like this and meeting people and talking to people and getting to know people. I had another point to that, and I don't remember what it was. The point was that there's so many things it's really hard to tell in an interview if it's going to be a culture fit. I don't know that there's really any way to find that out in an interview. So that's why stuff like this is more important. But to your point, you don't have to stay there forever either. If you get there a couple of years and it's not a culture fit, move on. For yourself, it doesn't benefit anybody for you to be in a place that you're not growing and the company's, it's just not fitting. It doesn't work for either person, so move on.
I think that's good advice. All right, so we have one last question before we're going to turn it over to the audience. During your last job search, how important was culture fit to you? And how did you evaluate potential employers on culture?
Yeah, I would say I pretty much just answered that.
You totally did.
It became very important. The longer my career went on, I think it's become more and more important, which is why word of mouth is, when I'm looking for a job, that's so much more important to me. Yeah, I don't know what else I can add that I didn't already say.
No. So when I was 50, I turned 50, I was laid off twice. You don't know this. I don't think. And the first time I went, okay, I'm 50. And I was already doing freelance writing. And I've been in sales my whole life. This is my first recruiting job. So was laid off the first time and I went, yeah, okay. So I'm going to build up my freelance writing client base so that I don't have all my eggs in one basket, right? So took a job in a startup, was laid off 8 months later when they ran out of money. Awesome. I was still 50, give or take, 51, I guess. I sent out 50 resumes because I'm really the big breadwinner in my household. Sent out 50 resumes, no joke, that day. Answered a Craigslist ad, you guys. I thought I was getting axe murdered. I went to this little company, and I was a professional sales rep flying all over the country 3 days a week, right? And I knew I didn't want to be on the road anymore. I was sick of it, right? Too many bars on Friday afternoon waiting for Delta to get their crap together, right? So that was my primary thing. Like, I need to make enough money, and I don't want to get on an airplane unless I'm going to Florida, right? so I went to this Craigslist job and took the job, and it was AWH, and they grilled me for an hour, all three partners. It was brutal, and they gave me a chance. They actually took a chance on a 50-year-old woman who had never been a recruiter before, right? And so culture had nothing to do with it. I am quite certain. I mean, I may have a master's degree, but I think like a blue collar worker, right? And I bring that mentality to any job. And so for me now, culture fit is super important. But then when I took this job, it was about making sure I had enough money to pay my mortgage. Really, really. And interestingly, in the 3 years, I'm evidently in demand as a technical recruiter now. That's like that's a thing, I guess. And so I get calls from recruiters all the time, and I always take their calls because it's really fun, and I get to hear their technique, and so I learn something from it. And I get job offers. I've gotten job offers. I turn them all down. Why do I turn them down? Culture. Isn't that weird? I love who I work with, seriously. And even though there are lots of days when I have like a really bad day and I come home and go, really? Where is the beer? I really still like who I work with. And so culture has become super important now, right? And I'm hiring for a junior developer and also mid-levels. Mid-levels. You get to work with us.
What languages?
.NET. Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
How important was culture fit to you during your last job search, and how did you evaluate it with potential employers?
Culture fit was the number one thing that I was looking for. So I did the values assessment, We Can Code It, and I was coming out of two really tough positions, one with a 3 people startup, one with thousands of people, and both were extremely damaging to me, to my psyche. So I was in this really tough place, and I had made the decision, despite coming out of boot camp and not having a job, not having much money in savings, not having a job, being, in my 30s, not having a job. It's terrifying, but I decided that I was going to come first and that I was not going to take a job unless it ticked every box on my values sheet. So yes, I understand that there are times when you need a paycheck. You do. But you are also worth enough to fight for the things that you want.
How did you evaluate the culture fit with employers that you were checking out? Tried to skip it.
I know I did. Because
You totally did.
the true reason that I knew immediately might sound bad. Okay. on my first interview call, the person that I was on the phone with cursed. I'm not telling. But it was just like the most like authentic, down to earth person, like conversation, phone interview that I had ever had in my life. I don't even remember what it wasn't. It was like damn or something, just like very casual, I was like, that's it. That's exactly where I want to be. I know, but that was it. And then also, like I was talking before about coming to meetups and meeting people and getting a vibe, coming into the office while people are working. If you can swing that will tell you everything you need to know. If you can just walk behind people and see what the environment is like and what the interaction is like.
Culture was probably most important to me. So I, on the other hand, was not the breadwinner of my household. I was coming out of a job where I quit without a job because I was in such a rough mental state from what I was doing that I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to value myself first. And my boyfriend was like, you know what? Do what you need to do. I was like, cool, you said it. Don't take it back. And I remember, so culture is always important to me. Being a Black woman, in predominantly non-Black spaces, there are other things that I look for to make sure that I'm going to be comfortable coming to work day in and day out. And I remember I applied for the job before I quit, and then I heard back after I quit. And the person on the other line, I was like, this is a young Black woman. Didn't have to see her. I knew that it was another Black woman on the other line. So I did some LinkedIn snooping. She's from my hometown. We had very similar, like our circle of friends almost crossed. And then based on the conversations that I had, I was like, this seems like a place that I want to be. And I think I didn't even I got the in-person interview because I had to do a phone and an in-person. And at that point I turned down any other interview because I knew that this was where I wanted to be. I walked in and there was a dog. Love dogs. That's a check in my book. And like I said, it was a Black woman on the other end of the phone who was interviewing me, and she was going to be my boss. And just the environment and the way that they asked questions. And so that's one thing that was really interesting to me. So we have to take an assessment, like a personality assessment, in order to determine whether this is the environment for you. It happens. But what was interesting was that the questions that were being asked weren't your normal interview questions. They were questions around, based on the assessment, I maybe wasn't paying attention to the question, and so I didn't score great. And so she was asking questions just to gauge, like, is this assessment actually correct? Or, was she just not paying attention? And so the attention to that kind of detail for me solidified the fact that, it didn't really matter what they offered me. This is where I wanted to be.
Yeah. Okay. That was a great answer. You ready for some audience questions?
Yes.
All right. Who has questions?
Hello. What are some red flags you see in job postings when people are talking about companies? What kind of things make you not apply? For me, it's if it says ping pong tables, anything about ping pong tables in the job description, I'm out.
For me, I see a listing and it says something like, we need rock star developers and we need immediate turn off. We need, I think there was one time I saw a post for a Java job, and I had a couple of years of experience at the time, that said they needed more number of years of experience in Java than it had even been around. Like, so you guys don't know what you're talking about. So another red flag. Yeah, but anything that has like this wow kind of language, that's always to me really a turnoff. And even just things like being so specific about number of years of experience of a certain thing. Like, okay, if you have, I want to know how many years of experience you have when I interview you, but if you have 10 years of Java experience and I'm hiring you for a Ruby on Rails job, fine. I can teach you syntax. I don't care if you know the language. That's kind of irrelevant. I want to know more about your ideas and your thinking process. And so yeah, I feel like job postings that are so focused on those specifics, they don't really care about that as much. That's another red flag for me.
So I can tell you really funny stories. Are you ready? Okay. If your interviewer is texting during your interview, okay, if the interviewer seems ill-prepared to discuss or repeats the questions that you already answered from the 6 other interviews that you did, or has this happened? Yeah, I've seen this. I have more stories, I'm sure. Let's see. If someone from outside the closed door room bursts in, interrupts your interview, and starts whiteboarding and interrupting the interview process, Okay, I've seen that. On job descriptions, you know, yeah, job descriptions are or ads, right? Is what you asked. And this is the last thing because I'm mic hog. Clearly, you should see me at karaoke. I'm so fun. The ads. So most ads suck. Most ads suck. Um, this sounds really bad, but I write really good ads. I think I write really funny ads, but I think they're funny. You may hate them. But most ads are like, I need this, 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 and this. They're inaccurate, whatever. And so, the ad's the ad. I wouldn't place a lot of stock in it because generally, and if you're dealing with a staffing agency, I promise you most of the time, and I work for a staffing agency on the side because I'm just like the freelance geek from hell. And that most of the time I find that the recruiters don't know anything about HTML, let alone JavaScript or whatever. They think Java is the same as JavaScript and, and it's like, dudes, no. So, but that doesn't mean that the job's a bad job. It just means that a lot of times there's a gap between the staffing agency doing the work and the people on the inside. So if you can get to the inside layer, that's really where you need to make your judgment,
It's good. So with the caveat that, again, I have like a certain value system that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing. But so a few things that happened to me. One large dev team was split into two portions of an interview. So half the dev team was in the first and then the rest were, and totally different vibes from each group. So there was clearly a divide within their team, and they like encouraged that enough that they let them interview separately, right? Instead of knowing that there's a divide and then encouraging them to sit together, which is like kindergarten, but let's see what else. Very cold interviewers don't want to talk about themselves at all. I think that's a red flag. If you can walk through offices and they're oddly quiet and everyone is kind of heads down, or a very sterile feeling, like you can get that vibe as well. I'm trying to think. Oh, and then, so my degree is in microbiology and I never worked in it, but the interviewer wanted to know, like, how was it being a microbiologist? And did you do, work in a food lab? And my resume is right there on the table. And I've never worked as a microbiologist. Red flag.
As far as job descriptions, years of experience kill me. I understand, but it doesn't make any sense. Because at the end of the day, somebody with 2 years of experience versus somebody with 5 years of experience, somebody with 2 years of experience might actually be better at the job than the person with 5 years of experience. So years of experience drives me nuts. And then once you get into the interview, if I can't turn the interview into a conversation, it's not somewhere that I want to be. I value myself in being able to talk to pretty much anyone. I kind of have to in my line of work. And if you're interviewing for a role that forces somebody to have to talk to almost anyone, and you cannot talk to me in a conversational sense, then that's not a place where I'd like to be. Also, places that kind of along the lines of like ping pong table. So the places that when you're interviewing and they just talk on and on about like, oh yeah, we go and get drinks as a team and then we do all of these things as a team. And it like, that's cool, but you're also not valuing somebody's life. And I came from a place where it should have been a red flag for me before of like, oh yeah, we go to happy hours and we do all of these things all the time together. And it's like, I don't want to be around you all the time. I love my coworkers, but the fact that is what you value is that you guys have to be together all the time, tells me that there's no work-life balance. And then it's funny because then they said that there's no such thing as work-life balance, and then that was funny to me.